Hi, I'm Father Jim Forson, and I'd like to share with you some reflections on this Gospel of the 13th Sunday of Ordinary Time. You know, for any of you who were alive during the 70s, you could not help but have heard a TV commercial by AT&T phone service that was just everywhere. And it was that one of reach out and touch someone. And they even had a cute little jingle to go with it. Reach out and touch someone. Anyway, you know, I didn't like it. I get it, but the idea of reaching out and touching someone who may be alone or lonely and how wonderful this service could be, fine. But they didn't put in that commercial how much it was going to cost and how much money they were going to make. But anyway, even though I didn't like it, there was in that commercial a deep truth. It's the deep truth that we hear in the gospel today. And this gospel passage from Mark, if you want to know what the persona of Jesus Christ was like and what kind of man he was, you don't have to read any other passage of the gospel, but this one, to know what kind of a man he was. And I encourage you, read this gospel 2 or 3 times. You will come to see who Jesus really was and why people were so attracted to him. The gospel starts with him having crossed the Sea of Galilee yet once again. And as he arrives, crowds just flock to him because there's something about him that just draws people to himself. And as they are crowding around him, one man named Jairus, an official of the synagogue, his daughter is dying, and he begs Jesus to come and try to heal her before she dies. And so off he goes, and the crowd with him, and everyone's kind of pushing and shoving and so on. And as he's going along his way, he's kind of working with that crowd. And I think, all of us have had those moments where, we're being jostled and crowded in, and we want our personal space, but, Jesus is just going with it. And one of the people in that crowd was a woman who would have been bleeding badly for years, and she thought, if I just touch his cloak, I'll be healed. And she did, and she was. And Jesus felt the change and said, who touched me? And the disciples responded, what do you mean, who touched you? Everybody's touching you. But he knew there was a difference, and she knew there was a difference, and she knew she had crossed the line. Because by Jewish law, a woman who was bleeding for whatever reason could never touch a man. To do so would render him ritually impure, and there were a series of elaborate ablutions he would have to do in order to re-enter the synagogue. And for her, there was various types of punishment, one of which was being stoned to death. So she knew what she had done in the infraction she had caused, and she just threw herself at his feet, as it said, trembling and in fear. And Jesus didn't say what others could have said, like, do you know what you've done? Or at least you could have asked. No, he treated her with compassion, understanding, and he even called her daughter, a term of compassion. Daughter, your faith has healed you. And then he continues on his way, only to find out that Jairus' daughter has died. And outside the house are the people who are wailing. And he tells them she's not dead, she's asleep. And their response is ridicule. Now, they knew who they were talking to. And they had heard about Jesus. And he had worked great miracles. He had calmed the sea. He had driven out the devils. He had multiplied the loaves and the fishes. He had healed a leper. This guy could work miracles. And their response could have been, well, let's see what he can do. But it wasn't. It was to mock him and ridicule him. But he didn't let that stop him. He went past and into the house with the family, and he reached out and touched her, and he healed her, and she came to life. Another daughter of God being healed and coming back to life. So great and powerful is the healing grace of God. And we see that healing grace of God in the person of Jesus, because rather than allow the demands of the world to overwhelm him, rather than allow this crowd that's just pushing and shoving to put him off, rather than allow this woman who really crossed cultural lines and did what she did to upset him, and rather than allow that jeering crowd to stop him from doing what he had to do, he still could look and see suffering and desperate and hurting humanity needing the healing touch of God. And he reached out and he gave it to them. Well, today, we, disciples of Jesus, are called to do the same, to extend that healing touch of Christ to others. You know, I was at a funeral yesterday. And after the funeral was over with, this woman came up to me, and I didn't know who she was. And she said, you know, I've been wanting to talk with you for decades. You were a priest here at the parish when I was in the 8th grade. And you know, I said, oh, okay. And she said, no, there was one time when I came up to you and asked you about my dad, because my dad, he didn't believe in God. And I was worried that he wouldn't be able to go to heaven. And you told me that not to worry, your dad can go to heaven too. And I don't remember that at all. I do know that probably what I said to her was basic Catholic teaching, that salvation is extended to all people, and all people have the chance to come to know the truth about God given to us through Jesus Christ, whether on this side of the grave or the next side of the grave. That's just real simple, basic Catholic teaching. Must have been what I had said to her. But she said to me, it made such a difference in her life because it calmed her about her father's fate. And even on his deathbed, she told me, he started to believe in God. And when she told me that story, it so touched my heart. I was so glad for her and so happy to hear that story. So tell me, who touched who? She touched me. She extended God's healing grace, that grace that is so great and all-powerful, to me. And that's what we are called to do today. All of us. Maybe we can give a little bit of thought to who in our lives we know that could really use God's healing grace today. And I can't cure people like Jesus did, but I can do what he did when the world was just too much with him, but he didn't let that overpower him. Or the people were mocking him, and he wouldn't let that stop him. Or people were just crossing lines and crossing boundaries, but he could still extend compassion to them and understanding. I can do what Jesus did and reach out and be able to offer that healing touch of grace to someone who may be in such desperate need of it. That all of us can do. I'll tell you, one thing's for sure. I'm going to carry the memory of that woman and the story she told me in my heart. I'm going to carry it forever. So great is the wonderful and all-powerful grace of God. Tell me, who of us wouldn't want to be a minister of that great and all-powerful grace of God?